Welcome to She Sells Radio. Today, you are going to learn from someone who started his first business $600,000 in debt and scaled it to a nine-figure exit, and is now passionate about teaching entrepreneurs and children the financial literacy they need to learn, as well as scaling and growing successful businesses. So whether you want to grow and scale a successful company, like I know so many of our listeners do, or maybe you want to empower your kids around money, which, by the way, as a mom of a now 3-year-old and 6-month-old, I'm really starting to think about that a lot for my kids. So I'm excited about that part of the conversation. I know you're going to get a ton of value from learning from my guest today, who is Lee Benson. Lee's a best-selling author and a business scaling master who has founded and sold 7 successful businesses. Jack Welch, the former chairman and CEO of GE, said that Lee has built the best business management system he's ever seen. So if that's not a resounding recommendation, I don't know what is. Lee, welcome to She Sells Radio. I'm really, really looking forward to our conversation today.
Elise, it's so good to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. So you and I were connecting a bit in the pre-chat, and I was saying, look, I'm excited to learn everything from you, both as an entrepreneur who wants to grow and scale her business, as well as a mom of young kids. So I want to talk about all of it today. And I think what would be really powerful is I'd love to start with just more of your background. So when I was reading up on your background and the fact that you started your first company, Able Aerospace, right? I think was the name. And you started $600,000 in debt and then grew that company from 3 to 500 employees and 9 figures over the next 15 or so years. I'd love if you could take us back to that time when you were starting and what that journey looked like for you. How did you start off so deep in debt? And then what was the business trajectory from there that led to your success?
Yeah, the first organization was actually Able Metallic Services. It was a small electroplating company where I was the general manager. And it was something I did during the day to kind of pay for my music habit, because I would play in bands at night. In the 1980s, I played over 1,000 nights and concerts and all of that. And in a lot of ways, it was my first real business. I was kicked out of the house at the beginning of my senior year in high school, and I had already become financially independent, very competent that way. And it was a sort of a non-event financially to get my own apartment. And a big part of how I supported myself was playing music in clubs. It was fantastic. And then to kind of get to your question, you fast forward, here's this company. I want to go one direction. And we had really one customer, which is a horrible position to put yourself in for any business owner. They were 90+% of our business. They cut us off overnight. That's a whole story in itself. And I went from 25 employees down to 3. My boss said, closer to sell it, you've got 30 days. I couldn't find anybody to buy it. So I went back and said, look, I want to go this direction. He said, you've never done it before. It'll never work. I don't believe in it. And I said, well, great. Well, let me assume the debt. And if I turn it around, you get paid back all this debt. And if not, I assume the creditor debt. And he said, great, take this thing. So the 3 employees in that first year, and this was late 93 when I took it over. The first year, we almost went out of business about 15 times. I bet a lot of your listeners can relate to that. But I never thought I would fail. Like, there's always a way. And it was my job to figure it out. In that first year, 94, we did $360,000 in sales, and our capital equipment budget was $175. And I'm not kidding. Went to an auction and got all these shells so we could sort of stage work that we could go out and find. And all the growth that we had from there, because we went from that first year, really low sales, to 9 figures in sales and well into a 9-figure exit, was 100% financed by the work that we went out and got. Had to hit the road and sell it. Not a dollar of investment equity capital at all coming in. Where a lot of folks say, hey, when we start the business, we need to go raise money and play this whole, I call it playing the startup game. Instead of leaning into our customers and going out there and creating real value that they want to repeat, purchase from us. And we were able to do it. And it was a wildly capital intensive business. We had tens of millions of dollars in equipment, parts, inventory sitting on the shelf. And through all of that, had to raise no outside money. We built great relationships with banks. and had credit facility towards the end when I sold it of north of $30 million. And it was great. It was a tool. So much to unpack from that,
Yeah. Yeah.
from there all the way to where I am today. And wow, is it exciting. I feel so much smarter today than a year ago.
Oh
And a
my God.
year from today, it'll be even better.
For sure. Oh my gosh, for sure. And I actually, when you're talking, I had a number of questions show up, but one of the things I want to ask, because Lee, one of the things we teach our clients about sales and why I think a lot of people struggle to achieve their sales goals is that there's often a gap. And I call it the big three, which are three core areas that for me transformed my life and my relationship with sales. And when I didn't have I think we're always growing, to your point. So I'm going to say mastery loosely. I know there's a lot more I get to learn in these areas, but when I wasn't as far along on the journey, I really struggled in these. And when I learned them, it unlocked everything. So one is shifting your relationship with money and worthiness around receiving money. Two is for women learning to sell in a way that feels aligned with them as women. And then three is belief systems, which account for 95 to 98% of our results, according to neuroscience. So you said something really important there at the beginning. You said, this is paraphrasing, but I never felt like we were going to fail, right? You said there's always a way. I can only imagine, that night when or that day when the one customer who accounts for 90% of your business shuts it off in that moment. And then you said there were 15 times you almost failed or almost went out of business in the next year. There had to be some thoughts that showed up of doubt. There had to be some thoughts that showed up of how in the world am I going to do this? But what was the core belief that you held and that you embodied that allowed you to not give up and not give in and continue pushing through in those dark nights of the soul? What was that belief for you?
Yeah, I actually talk about this in the book titled Value Creation Kid, the healthy struggles that your children need to succeed. And I call it the value creation cycle. So there's a struggle to build a capability, which increases confidence, and then use that to actually create value. So when I'm 6, 7 years old, I'm being asked unsolicited by neighbors, not friends or family, would you please pull weeds in my garden for 25 cents an hour? And back then you could get 2 candy bars and have change. I said, sure, I'll do that. And then, wow, this is a lot of work and I'm doing it every couple of weeks. I wonder how else I can make money. And then I started shoveling snow where I grew up in Spokane, Washington, got a lot of snow back then. And I would get 50 cents. It would take me about 30 minutes to do a driveway and a sidewalk. So, wow, I just fourfolded my money. Then I got a paper route. Then I was a dishwasher, busboy, and a cook. And by the time I was kicked out of the house in my senior year, right at the start of it, it was a non-event to afford that stuff. So this value creation cycle, the struggle, get a capability, build confidence, use it to create value. I just kept doing this loop, and I learned to trust the struggle. So no matter how hard it got, I always knew there's a way coming out the other side. And I could do anything that I set my mind to, because that saved me from, I would say, a pretty toxic and dangerous home environment. So much to unpack there as well. But I look at this value creation cycle and trusting the healthy struggle. Let's get kids started really early, like I did, and you never get off the track once you get on it. And this is really about creating a value creation culture within organizations where every decision, every action is about improving what's most important and really creating value. And same thing in the family. How do you operationalize value creation within families? And for me, when I talk about value creation, most people go right to money. I said, no, there's 3 macro buckets. One is material value. The second one is emotional energy value. And the third one is spiritual value. And I think positive emotional energy is the scarcest commodity on the planet, because when that's on 9 or 10 on a scale from 0 to 10, you can do anything. When it's on 1, you get a flat tire and it ruins your entire week. And so I'd rather live a life half as long on 9 or 10 than 1 or 2. So I think about value creation across the board in those 3 buckets: material, emotional energy, and spiritual. How does that resonate with beliefs?
100%. I'm writing those down. There's so much. The emotional energy piece. This is something where I wasn't aware for so long. And I lived most of my life with low-grade anxiety and self-doubt and fear, and wasn't even cognizant of how our emotional state affects the capability of ourselves to think, right? And to solve problems, because we can only think to the level of our feeling and our emotions. So what you just said right there, Lee, about I'd rather live half the time, but live it at that 9 or 10 emotionally, it resonates so much, because once you figure out how to hit that 9 or 10, and then to me, the game is stay there as long as you can. And we're not going to stay there forever, because it's life and things happen. And to your point, we'll have things come up where we get to have a healthy struggle to figure out the next iteration of our evolution there. But it's life is so different when you're at that 9 or 10 level. It really is. So I may want to circle back to that with you, because I think our listeners will really resonate with that. But I want to make sure we didn't miss something else that you said, which to me, I was like, gosh, I want to dive deeper into that. It's such a soundbite. Trust the struggle. Trust the struggle. So if somebody is listening and they are going through a period of struggle right now in their business, or maybe they see their kids struggling, but if they're going through that period of struggle, the conditioning is to say, for many of us, to say, I'm a failure. I can't do it. This is feedback that I should give up. What I'm hearing you say is to reframe it and look at it as what's being asked to evolve out of me, right? Or who do I need to become in order to rise above this? But I want to hear from you, like, what's a powerful question someone could ask themselves if they find themselves in that moment of struggle in their business or their life? What question can they ask to help reframe it and find the gift in the challenge and in the struggle?
Foundationally, struggle does not automatically equal trauma. And I feel like with kids and with adults, any struggle at all is bad. And if that was true, then the less I went to the gym, the stronger I would get. The more I ate anything I wanted, because that was the easiest thing to do, the more fit I would look, and the lower body fat and everything else. I mean, if you thought about it for just a couple of minutes, it makes really no sense. And so I believe the whole purpose of life is to elevate human consciousness. But let's say it more simply, to figure stuff out. The more stuff we figure out, the easier everything gets and the more value that we can actually create in the world. Mm-hmm. So once you I would say, think back to struggles that you've had, and when you came out the other side and said, boy, that didn't feel very good going through it, but look what I learned and look what I can share. And even unhealthy struggle can be leveraged to create value in the world. Just look at Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning, the book, right? You get to make a choice. But I say, learn to trust, and I would say even love the struggle, because if you're doing the work right, you're going to come out the other side able to create so much more value. But if you choose to be a victim and see it as trauma and swirl and stay there, not a very healthy place for yourself or for really anybody around you. So that's how I think about it. Does that resonate?
It does. And you said, so is there a difference between healthy struggle versus unhealthy struggle? And if so, how do we know the difference between where we are?
Healthy struggle is figuring things out in life. If let's look at business. And oh my gosh, sales aren't there. Why aren't people buying our stuff? We're in love with our stuff. How come they're not in love with our stuff, right? And we're focused on the wrong thing and not truly creating value for our customers, whether it's a product or service. So where are we focusing? Where are we struggling? What's that like for anybody building a business, whether you're, in 6 figures, 7, 8, 9, whatever it is, where do you need to be at every single point in time, that critical point, whatever you want to call it, where you need to be to create the most value next in your organization? And if sales is an issue, as an example, well, what are all the pieces that make that up? Do our prospective customers really like what we have? Is it just a matter of they don't know about us? Or maybe we haven't done the work to prove that there's a really solid product market fit. But when you think about that and you look at this whole value stream from identifying customers in your addressable market, what's the sweet spot in the addressable market? Because there's all customers aren't created equal. And then how do they hear about you? How do they get into the funnel? What does that whole journey feel like to where they buy it? There's an ongoing experience, maybe. We want them to tell 2 friends or maybe 10 friends, relationship-based selling, word of mouth, whatever it is. But as you think about that whole, I call it sort of a value creation process flow, Where do you need to be at every single point in time? And you'll probably have to struggle to build a capability to do that one part of it better. And
Mm,
you could list this and just rank them red, green, or yellow. And red is, wow, we've got a lot of work to do. Yellow, we're getting close. Green, it's working really well.
yeah.
And as you move along, those colors are going to constantly change. This is the fun, amazing game of business. And yes, there's a little bit of struggle there. You don't just wake up and everything works, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, for sure. If someone is listening, because we have quite a few listeners who are solopreneurs, or they're still doing founder-led selling. And so they are aware there's so many different things that could and should change in the business in order to create more value. And yet there's also the day-to-day of, I need to be selling, right? I need to be selling. I need to be, for many of them, delivering. We've got coaches, consultants who listen to this as well. Um, how would you advise that someone allocate their time between the actual day-to-day delivery and implementation of what they need to do to keep the business running and generate revenue versus the bigger picture, strategic planning? And to your point, looking at things and ranking them red, green, yellow, keeping in mind too, that a lot of our listeners are moms and they may not have a full 40-hour work week available. So I don't know, I may have just thrown a doozy at you, but I have a feeling you have an answer and some thoughts on that, of how you would allocate time.
I think it's a great question. I work with
Yeah.
organizations that are as small as solopreneurs all the way up to value over $50 billion as public companies. And these challenges they're just, it's a scale, difference, but they're the same really all the way through. And one of the things I talk about in my book, Your Most Important Number, is eating and dreaming at the same time. So eating is whatever it takes to get results right now, today, short term, this quarter, this week, sometimes today, if you're on the edge like we were in the first year. And dreaming is doing things differently to get an even better result in the future. And when you're starting out as a solopreneur, you're probably 80 to 90% eating, but you need to spend at least a little bit of time, thinking about doing things differently to get a better result in the future. Because I believe the primary job, responsibility of the leader of the organization, whether you're the, founder, CEO, president at any stage, is to continually increase the value of your organization. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And ideally, as time goes on, and you grow, because we don't have limitless resources where we can just assign it to everybody. We're doing everything ourselves. But as time goes on and you're able to start building, you're doing really smart work, you'll probably level out to where you're somewhere in the 80% dreaming and 20% eating. And that's where I ended up by the time I sold my business, from working 60 to 80 hours a week, which was normal and I loved it and it never felt like work, that probably only took me about 15 hours a week to kind of run the business. The rest of the time, it's all the dreaming stuff. Who could we partner with, travel the world, land, bigger deals that we hadn't thought of before, add new capability, connecting the dots better. But I would say to the listeners, think about it in eating and dreaming. How much time do you spend doing things you have to do today to meet the results that you need to keep this business going? And then how much time do you spend thinking about and implementing things that you can do differently to get a better result in the future within your business? And there's also a chapter in my book around strategy, and it says, hey, you've completed your strategy, congratulations, you're 3% of the way there. 97% is actually going in and doing this stuff.
Absolutely. So, okay, that makes a ton of sense. And I appreciate the breakdown, because whether you have 20 hours a week to work, 40 hours a week more, we can all think about, all right, what is 10 to 20% of that for the dreaming? If currently all I'm doing is eating and I'm not even thinking about scaling or how to grow. I want to ask you, Lee, one other question before we shift to talking more about your new book and how we can empower our kids financially. So you say, and you've talked about this some already in this interview, but I want to go deeper. The challenge for all of your businesses and for your clients as well has been to accelerate the rate at which you create value. So I'd love to go deeper into that, accelerating the rate at which we create value. What do you mean by that? And what are some of the, again, questions or things we can be looking at to start accelerating that rate?
Sure. For an organization, you're doing this correctly when the value of your organization is increasing over time. And the
Mm.
better you get at the work, that increase will start accelerating, going in. And value creation, what we're talking about is creating this value creation culture where every decision, every action that every team member is making and taking is through the lens of how will this improve what's most important, which is increasing the value that their team is designed to create. For the overall organization, maybe that number is cash flow or what your version of profitability. But as your organization grows, every single team, whether there's, HR, engineering, sales, marketing, et cetera, they'll all have a most important number that does two things. Above all others, it says that team is winning or losing the game on the value they were designed to create. And two, that number will drive the majority of the right behaviors. That second part is really important because you can pick numbers that have a lot of unintended consequences going in. And this value creation culture is for every stakeholder. It's every team member in the organization, it's all of our customers, it's every shareholder, et cetera. And again, it's not just money, it's material, which is really important if we want to have security as we go forward with our families. But emotional energy, leaders should be creating this energizing environment, and they do that by passionately talking about what's possible and productive ways to get there, not what's wrong with people and things and why stuff won't work, which seems to be what most people want to talk about. Super deflating. If you want to energize, passionately talk about what's possible and productive ways to get there. And then the third bucket, the spiritual bucket, that means something different to everybody. It could just be connectedness to the community. It's love. It's your faith and whatever that looks like. But every organization, nonprofit, for-profit, and I would say even government, they play in all three of those buckets. So you're thinking about total value creation culture.
Okay. Thank you. That makes a ton of sense. I love that. I want to ask, we could go so much deeper onto the business side of things, but I want to make sure we hit your new book, Value Creation Kid, and talk about I love you say this, how to prevent kids from becoming spoiled, fearful, lazy, or entitled. So like I mentioned, I'm a relatively new mom. It's so interesting with our 3-year-old. I mean, both my kids are incredible. I love them both, 2 little boys. And with my 3-year-old, I have seen the number of toys that he has received in a short amount of time. Like he developed a monster truck fascination over the past 6 months. We probably have, Lee, I mean, dozens and dozens of toy monster trucks that he's accumulated just in the past few months from well-meaning family members, but wanting to give him gifts and wanting to just shower him with these toys. And it's like, it's fun. And he's not entitled, but as a mom, I've started to just be very conscious of how he assumes things come and how he assumes that, oh, we can just go buy whatever we want. And I care about teaching him abundance. I care about teaching him prosperity principles and all of that, because I do believe in that very much. And I also want him to have an appreciation for what he has. So sometimes in my mind, I'm like, gosh, if he just had one toy, not that we're going to do it, like if he just had one, I feel like he would value it so much more. Right. So anyway, I say all of that because I'm really curious to hear from you and your perspective on why this matters, what value creation with kids looks like and why it's so critical for them to understand it.
Okay, and there's a correlation with organizations as well as the family, and the short version of it is when you operationalize sort of the rules of engagement that employees are working within, and this is the system from which they create value, they don't instantly become perfect value creators. They discover over time how to create more and more and more value. But we create that. It's operationalized, our approach to meetings, strategy, how we think about the business, how we create value. Same thing in the family. I think the biggest miss is that a lot of folks believe a motivational nudge will fix the world. Like, oh, if every kid just read my book, everything would be solved. No, it really won't. I think our job, as parents, should be to create an environment where kids can discover their value creation superpower going forward. So So now we're kind of operationalizing, and I find that most parents are doing pieces of this. But what we talk about in the book, my co-author Scott Donnell and I, is something called the gravy stack method. What's a really simple way that families can do this? Because I'm real interested in low income and middle income families. That's the largest percentage of the population. If it won't work there, then we missed. So there's 4 pieces to it. First is value creation. Second is house rules. Third is financial competency. And fourth is healthy struggle. So how do you talk about value creation in the household? What does that really mean? Well, we've got, again, material, emotional, spiritual. The house rules, we break it down to 3 E's in there. First is expectations. What's your job for the family? And that you don't get paid extra for this. This is your job. And as you get older, you pick up more responsibilities. Third would be expenses. At some point, you start picking up some of your own expenses. And as you get older, all the way to being launched into adulthood, you pick up more and more and more of those. And then the third piece of it would be extra money. How do they earn extra money in a way that, sort of matches supply and demand and all that? I mean, don't pay them $100 to wash the car if you can get a pit you done for $10 down the street. They get $10 at most. And so you have all that in the house rules. And then third, financial competency. Literacy is great, but show me how you're actually applying it. And then fourth, healthy struggle. We need to struggle, just like, again, as I said earlier, going to the gym if we want to get stronger. Design intentionally these healthy struggles so they can learn to trust the struggle and value it, and they'll again never get off that track. So here's this 4 simple part gravy stack method, and I'll share one quick, very short 2-part story. So a parent and I'm following a number of families. A parent in Boston, the father, texts me and says, "Here's what my daughter Mia told me." She's 9 and she has a sister, Lane, who's 6. Mia said, "Daddy, thank you for saving the dirty dishes for me to help me with my value creation work." And I thought, okay, that's fantastic. So the book's, I think we published it back in April of this year, so it hasn't been out that long. So he calls me 2 weeks ago and he says, "Let me tell you how value creation summer is going," in his very thick Boston accent. He said, "Both of my daughters used to argue over who had to do the work. Now they're arguing over who gets to do the work. And Lane, the 6-year-old, is getting up earlier than the 9-year-old to walk the dog to get her value creation points and stuff before." And it's amazing. And I asked him, "Well, how's Melissa liking this, his wife?" And he said, "Man, she just loves it. It's just so incredible." It's within 2 months, completely changed their world in how the kids think about creating value and contribute to the value that the overall family actually creates.
Wow. What's your goal with this ultimately? I know you said that it sounds like your heart and your passion is really lower and middle income families. And I believe I saw somewhere about, is it 15 or 50 million kids impacted? What's the long tail of this that you're hoping to create with teaching kids value creation principles?
Yeah, I believe fully the reason that I'm here is to promote this whole concept of value creation. So I'm just doing it in everything that I do. And I look at a lot of the problems in the world right now, and I look at, so what's really happening here? We're launching kids out of high school into what's supposed to be adulthood. They can't think critically. They're not financially competent or literate. They're not being taught life skills. They seem to be being prepared for this sort of crony capitalistic machine of, let's get them to go through college and spend all this money and come out the other side. And as a result, they're not ready for adulthood, even when they come out of college, a lot of them. And so I'm working backwards from what would a healthy value creating, adult look like being launched out of high school? Well, they can think critically, they're financially competent, they value community, they value family, and they won't fall for all the craziness that's going on in the world right now. So for me, this is a bit of a long game. But I'm looking at these kids launching out of high school, and I really believe they're now into, most of them, the emerging adult phase that might go from 18 to 34, and then they start to actually become self-reliant and responsible. And so I just think it'd be a much better world, and the kids today are going to be running the world that I age out in, and I want it to be amazing. And I jokingly say I love science fiction, dystopian future movies, and all that. I just don't really want to live in one. I don't think it'd be entertaining as watching it big screen. That's my whole reason for doing this. And
Mm.
selfishly, I want an amazing world for my friends and family to interact in.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. I do want to ask one other question tied to healthy struggle, and then I want to share where people can get connected with you and your work. So I know there's a lot of different um, initiatives that you're leading right now. You mentioned designing healthy struggles at home. So I'm just curious, and I'm gonna just selfishly receive some personal coaching right now, but I think and I trust it will benefit our listeners as well. For someone with kids my age, obviously we're not going to do much for the 6-month-old right now, but a 3-year-old. Can you give an example of designing a healthy struggle that would be age appropriate for my toddler?
Yeah, in the book, Value Creation Kid, we have a whole bunch of things that you can do. Even boot camps that, could be a mommy boot camp, a daddy boot camp, where these are skills you're going to need. So every family's different, every kid's different. There's a lot of nuances there. But even a boot camp on how to make the bed, how to properly brush and floss, your
Mm,
teeth, how to greet people, how to act out in public if you're walking around in a shopping mall or at a restaurant. And so these are healthy struggles, at
mm,
age appropriate, very young, right? And then they just keep growing over time. And so you think about your children, and I really encourage every parent to look at, when I launch my child into adulthood out of high school, what characteristics do I want them to have? What character do I want them to have? And you're working backwards from there.
mm.
And by the way, you can start this at any age, because in all of my businesses, and collectively I've had thousands of employees that I've employed. I start with them as soon as they come in, and within 6 months they're on the train, or I give them a list of my competitors to go work for.
Got it. Amazing.
Is that
Thank you.
helpful?
It's very helpful. It's very helpful. Thank you. And so I know someone can go and they can get both of your books, Your Most Important Number and Value Creation Kid, on Amazon too. But I also know you've got on your website where people can go and connect further and learn more about your books. If you want to just take a moment and share, promote, however you want to share and promote your work. I know you've got a mastermind, I believe a couple of masterminds as well. So if someone is listening and they are resonating, which I know I am, with both the business scaling philosophies as well as how do we take this from the business world to really empower our kids and support our kids, what are the best ways for them to get connected with you, Lee? And what are some ways they can move forward in learning more about what you do?
Yeah, to understand what I'm doing here around value creation on the business side, organization really, because nonprofit I think is a big part of it,
Mm.
and the family side, you can find Your Most Important Number and Value Creation Kid in 40,000 channels anywhere you can get the book. We even do interviews after each chapter in Value Creation Kid, joint interviews. I do interviews after each chapter in Your Most Important Number for even more insights and background. And I encourage you to go to my website, which is etw.com. And we do a few things. One is we help organizations implement the mind methodology, all the stuff that I talk about in Your Most Important Number. And also, I work with CEOs in a number of different CEO mastermind groups that we call Execute. We limit it to 8. It's completely different than the more popular ones that have tens of thousands of members globally, in that we can see so deeply into each other's business. We know exactly the rate at which each CEO is creating value and how they've developed this value creation culture, that they get 80+% of everybody's brain power in the room to help them go faster. And the stories are
Mm.
incredible. Within 18 months, from billing $1 million a year to running at a $26 million a year rate.
Mm.
Uh, Companies range from just under $1 million in some of these groups when they start to $200 million, but all of them in high growth mode. And anyway, so it's such a great experience over there. So I
Right.
have my own groups and a number of folks that I've certified to be able to do this as well. So on the website, you can learn about these services that we provide. And for me, it's all about value creation and taking this to the world in organizations and in families.
Hmm. Thank you so much. This is, it's made me think a lot differently and bigger, which I always appreciate. I love connecting with people who help me think way bigger about life, impact, family, raising great humans as well. So Lee, thank you so much. We'll link your website and the books in our show notes as well. And I just so appreciate you coming on and adding a ton of value on our show today. So thank you again.
Thank you, Elise. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. To you, my listener, go connect with Lee, read his books, check out his work. This is really, really important because I know each and every one of you are out there wanting to go out and not only make income, but make a big impact. So it's important that you're able to grow and scale that to serve as many people as you can, and that you take these principles back home to your kids to help them become successful, happy, contributing individuals as well. So as always, thank you so much for being a listener of She Sells Radio. I'll see you on our next episode. Bye.